Many of today's most popular video games take place in dangerous post-apocalyptic landscapes. But are these games doing enough to prepare our kids for the actual post-apocalyptic future we will all soon face?
Well, I think they are. Studies have shown that these games are quite effective at teaching our kids skills that they'll need after the apocalypse, like finding shotgun ammo and leading elite squads of super soldiers.
But these aren't the advanced skills that they're going to need. They're going to need the more practical skills like how to build a shelter from abandoned cars, or how to find drinking water by collecting the morning dew in human skulls.
Or how to deal with depression when the sun is blocked out for 500 years by a cloud of radioactive dust.
Absolutely. Now, that's the type of knowledge these kids are going to need when their world has been turned into a brutal hellscape.
But these games don't have to be an accurate depiction of a post-apocalyptic world. They just need to teach the basic concepts, which they do. 72% of kids said that they know how to find items to barter at weapon shops and how to use medicine packs to heal zombie bites with these video games.
That's excellent to know. The game Fallout 3 has taught my son Charlie that it's easier to kill cyborgs with a grenade than a machine gun.
The games make it all seem deceptively simple. I mean, in the future, a kid's not going to be able to kill a 6-foot-long irradiated beetle just by pressing a few buttons. And he's going to have to get down there with an axe and hack and hack and hack.
David, our kids are going to have the rest of their lives to get actual experience in how to desperately fight for survival.
Exactly. What's important is that we teach our children the fundamentals now so that they can be successful in whatever nightmare scenario that they may find themselves in.
Well, if they survive that long.
Another flaw with these games is that most kids will become mutants themselves once the apocalypse hits.
It's a huge problem.
I think that it's a chance that we're going to have to take. Playing video games all day, alone and friendless, is simply the best way that we have to prepare our children for a life of solitude and a barren wasteland.
In the Impact segment tonight, the Navy Yard killer, Aaron Alexis, apparently played violent video games almost every night, according to his friends. This week, a violent video game called Grand Theft Auto was released to the public. $800 million in one day was spent on this game. And part of the attraction of the game are torture scenes where the player participates in the torture. Joining us now from Philadelphia, Dr. Chuck Williams, who teaches psychology at Drexel University. So you study these violent video games. What's your conclusion, Doctor?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on again, Bill. Look, the research is pretty clear. We have data to show that there is some negative impact from having people consistently consume violent media, both kids and adults. We have longitudinal studies that go back decades. For example, we have watched kids when they were 8 or 9 years old who, for example, watched TV shows like The Dukes of Hazzard. And then we followed them through adulthood, middle age, and we saw, for example, the kids who watched more TV shows like that, when they became adults, they had more run-ins with the law, for example. So the data has been pretty strong, and it's been pretty clear for a number of years.
But what about the video game component? Is that more intense than television shows like The Dukes of Hazzard, which to me was a mindless, harmless program? So I can't contradict the study, but I can tell you, as a kid, I watched the Westerns and the Army shows and those kinds of things. And maybe it affected me, but I don't have a record. I've never been arrested. I've never punched anybody, so it's hard for me to buy that. But I want to know about these very intense video games because I think it's a different ball game now.
You're absolutely right. What people have to realize is that unlike watching a television show, unlike watching a movie, what happens is you're actually engaging in simulated acts of violence. You're learning how to be violent. People also have to remember that some of the same technology that we may find in violent video games, we use to train Navy SEALs, for example, and law enforcement officers. They use the same type of technology to go through simulated exercises to rescue hostages or to take down people like bin Laden. So people have to understand that the difference between, say, a TV show and a video game is that with a TV show, you're not acting it out, but with a video game, not only are you acting it out, Bill, but you're being rewarded for being violent.
So is there a link between violent video games and these recurring acts of mass killing in our society? Well, the answer may not be as clear-cut as you think. Joining me now, live from Philadelphia, is Dr. Patrick Markey. He's an associate professor of psychology at Villanova University who researches video game violence. Dr. Markey, let's just get right to it. There's been plenty of research out there which shows a link between violent video games and aggression, but can we go so far as to say that playing violent games triggers or leads someone to committing any violent act?
No, it's very difficult to make that kind of claim. That, as you said, we know that violent video games are linked to increases in hostility and so forth, but there's really no evidence to suggest that such violent media is linked to these shootings or really any real-world violence. That what we find in our laboratory studies are very small effects affecting our thoughts, our cognitions, but not so much affecting our actual real behaviors.
Well, what about minds that are psychotic? I suppose it's difficult to tell after the fact when these individuals are often killed, such as the Newtown shooter or the Navy Yard shooter, what triggered anything specifically, but the effect that a violent video game has on a normal college-aged male, those are the subjects of a lot of these studies, or adolescent, may not be the same when it comes to people who have serious mental problems.
No, you might absolutely be correct. The problem is we just don't know yet, that the research really is not there. It's irresponsible for researchers in my field to take research done on, as you said, normal adolescent males and so forth, and then try to generalize those findings to these actual horrific acts, that we're kind of essentially going beyond the data that we've collected in our laboratory when we try to predict it. So you might be right, but I mean, I would guess that the bigger cause of these types of situations are the shooter. I mean, it's already the news reports coming out that, I mean, he probably was paranoid, schizophrenic, and so forth. And looking for whether or not video games contribute to that really seems to be looking at perhaps the smallest effect here, if any.